Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And what I have for you today is a reaction, an analysis of the latest McKinsey claim that we can measure developer productivity. And in order to do so, I am joined once again, as usual, by Adi. Hi, Adi.
Hello. Nice topic. Measure.
So what do we think about measuring developer productivity? I remember a few years ago, it's been years, there was a prevailing point of view that we cannot measure developer productivity. And this is, I think, why the article from McKinsey is called, Yes, You Can Measure Software Developer Productivity. But before we jump into it, what do you think?
I don't understand the reason why. I mean, do we measure doctors' productivity? Do we measure lawyers' productivity? Or any other, let's say, knowledge workers like that? Why do we need to have this measurement? Why is it helpful? I don't get the point.
Yeah, and the question is, I guess, do you want to measure individuals? Do you want to measure teams?
Exactly. So what does it mean, developer productivity? Is one person doing a task and putting... No, they do everything, like analysis, some development, some testing, and they do something, they put something in production. Okay, then it's very easy to measure productivity. It's time to market, right? So you can say, look, this person, by their own, they develop this stuff, they put it in production, it has no defects, great. It took 2 days or 5 days or whatever. That's very easy. But after that, when you work in a team, it's so difficult. Like, how could you measure one surgeon's productivity if you have a team of assistants and you know, other surgeons in a room, and you have 15 people there working for that operation?
This also reminds me of the old and dark joke that, you know, the surgery is successful, but the patient has died.
Yes. Yes. I don't get this. I remember also articles from Atul Gawande about this, because it's related somehow, in a way. You know, he wrote one very famous book called Checklist Manifesto, which I really like.
And to clarify for our audience, Atul Gawande was a surgeon.
Yes, yes. And he talks about how to optimize medicine and generally processes in medicine. He does stuff very similar with Agile, but in this field of work. And he never talks about personal productivity. He talks about deficiencies in the process. He talks about coaching, for shockingly, how he got a coach as an older doctor, a surgeon, as a coach for him, because he felt he would not improve anymore in the skills. So maybe that's a way, you know, to measure someone's productivity, by assessing through a coach, maybe, somehow, what they're doing. So it's more like a specialized way of assessing someone's productivity. But why is it helpful? What do we want to achieve for that? That's what I don't get.
Okay.
The overall scheme.
And just to clarify, you haven't read the article? I did.
Yeah, I've just browsed it a bit. I didn't read it because I found it... I saw this before, 20 years ago.
Yeah, on one hand, to be honest, I found it, at least the premise is not that bad. They understand what they can and cannot measure, and stuff like, and what has not worked in the past and so on. Mm-hmm. So it captures a bit of, I mean, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we'll see what we think about the actual metrics. That's because that's where the core of the issue lies. But let me throw another thing at you, which I think is interesting. Isn't the fact that we run away from metrics as software developers a symptom of not wanting to take responsibility for our jobs?
Yeah, I think so. But it's obviously when you don't want to do that, you move away from responsibility and you move responsibility to the group, right? It's not what I did. It's someone else. When you have a group, you have a committee, right? It's very easy to shift things around. Yeah. On the other hand, it's not easy, right? You don't have a direct way of measurement, so that's why we look more on market measurement, time to market, cycle time, lead time,
Yeah, and to add to this, I was thinking also at analogies, and I was wondering, do ad agencies measure individual productivity? Because in an ad agency, what you have is a bunch of people who brainstorm on ideas for the next ad, let's say. And then you have a bunch of people who execute, like they're doing the graphics and the video and the music and put everything together and then publish the ad. And then after a while, they realize whether it has been successful or not. Yeah, and the only way to know if it's been successful is whether the sales have increased, and even that is not the best way of measuring the outcome, because sales can increase for a number of different reasons, not only because of the ad campaign, but it's the closest approximation that you could have.
From my kind of limited knowledge on this, but I'm kind of related. I know people who work in this area, and I worked a bit with teams in this area of marketing and also advertising. I know that they're very focused on customer and the product and how well business metrics, like how much you sold and so on. But there are also other measurements that you do through social kind of studies, like because sometimes you just want to bring some new product to the market, and you just want to see how well it's perceived, and so basically you do some surveys, so on. So you have other measurements, other ways of measuring this. But again, you look at the end products, and you look at the users, at the customers, at the market. You don't measure directly what's being done. It's, I don't know, never drew the logo. How productive was that?
Yeah, and because I'm thinking, like, okay, you have a brainstorming session and you get out of it with an idea or 4 ideas or 3 ideas for an ad, and you execute on those and so on. So what can you measure? How many ideas every person has had in that brainstorming meeting? Which idea was selected? Whose idea was selected? When in fact it's actually probably a mix and match of multiple things.
Because that's brainstorming is I've been there. I've done a bit of this as well in my previous life, so I know that typically a brainstorming in advertising is typically like you play with a lump of clay. You take someone's idea, you add in it, you shift it a bit, you change it a bit, and at the end, it's okay. Someone probably started off this, but in the end, it's so different that everybody had an impact on it. So that's how it works.
Yeah, and then if let's say you are doing a successful ad and it doubles the sale, or whatever would be a gold standard for how could you measure who had the most contribution to that ad? It's virtually impossible, right? Because
you know what happens. the team will know.
Yeah.
So typically you'd ask the team who had the most impact on our sales increase. And you do have situations when there is one or two persons in the team who would be most of the time the persons with the good ideas and driving those good ideas to production. So the team would say, look, this person is the person you want. They have ideas. It's that person has always good ideas, and for the last, I don't know, 7 of 10 campaigns, they came up with this. So the team will know. It just needs to ask them.
Yeah, and yes, but then it's a matter of actually dealing with social systems, complex adaptive systems, flows, and outcomes. In fact, so
and
it's really
like advertising is really related with the software development. You're right, because you come up with an idea, but then you need to implement it. And when you implement it, someone comes up and says, yeah, when you draft that, I don't know, outdoor sign, you need to have this and that. And you cannot do that because of colors show, I don't know how in the night. So you need to change the color scheme, but you want some color schemes on the web, and you cannot use the color scheme because people who have, I don't know, the deficit of a blind side of sight or something like that, they won't be able to see it. So you come up with all sorts of things like that. Even if you have a good idea, and when you start implementing it, you need to hear and to have the feedback of the people who start working on graphics and on messages, on copywriting and radio or video messages, stationary messages, and so on. So you need to adjust the initial idea somehow until it comes into practice. So it's a bit the same like what you do with the software architecture. You come up with it, and then people will start looking at it, how you implement it, how you test it, what kind of infrastructure you need for it, and you need to adjust bits and parts to be able to make it.
Yeah. And actually, a similar activity that I learned a bit more about is production of a TV series.
Yeah.
Because in the modern approach to producing a TV series is that you usually start with a kind of blueprint, like this is the premise, these are the characters, this is kind of what happens in the first season, roughly. And then if this goes, passes the phases and you get investment and all that, you hire a bunch of writers and you do what's called the writer room. And what you do in a writer room is you get them all together and say, okay, so let's talk about the next 3 episodes or something like that. This is kind of the premise. Let's see how we can make this story better. And they start coming up with ideas and mixing and matching. And after you do this process, 1 or 2 of the writers will go separately and write the script for 1 episode. Mm-hmm. So it's basically you split the work between them, and then they come back for feedback and another draft and so on. So you go through a whole process. But in the end, okay, you have a couple people who maybe wrote the script for 1 episode, but if you look at the whole series, which is what matters, if you have so not a procedural, but kind of story that goes through a longer series, then once again you are building together and putting pieces together. And it's a contribution from everybody, and it's very hard to measure someone's contribution. What would you say? You wrote 10,000 words more than the other writer.
But again, the team will know who is slacking, who didn't have any idea for the last 5 meetings, who didn't write much for the last 5 episodes. It's the same thing. The team will know, or someone who was there in the meetings. very easily observable. That's a similar thing with, let's say, a daily meeting or a planning meeting or something like that you'd have in software.
Yeah, and I guess what's probably different is that in these areas, people are very used with the idea of investment.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, we'll invest some money. You know, we are talking about ads. When you, as a company, you are thinking about advertising, the first thing you learn is that 50% of advertising is useless, but you don't know which 50%.
Yeah.
So basically, you know that you'll be investing a budget and you'll be getting out of it probably, hopefully, 50% of the outcome that you might, that's the, how would you say, the ratio that you are best hoping for. But in reality, you have no idea whether anything will work until it actually works or not. So it's really about, let's say, we'll give you 50,000 euros and in 3 months we'll see what the results are and what is the return on investment. That's basically it. And it's kind of the same with the TV series, because executives will look at the scripts and say, oh, yeah, that looks interesting. They have no idea whether it works or not, by the way.
It's a hint, yeah. It's just a hint, maybe some experience. And again, you'd know that some of the executives are better because they have this feeling of what's good or not. So again, it's experience.
And then you measure the audience and you say, oh, okay, so it was good or it wasn't that good. And we stop it or we continue. But the mindset is so clear on this. Everybody knows it's a return on investment. Return on investment. It's not like, everybody would want a perfect and successful series or a perfect and successful ad, but there is no such thing, and everybody knows that.
Yeah, and they would like it with the minimal investment, of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now,
all right.
There was also a trend, just one thing to say. There was this kind of trend in advertising a few years back when they were doing some sort of hook ads to see which is better. So this is really interesting. They had 3, 4, 5 ideas, and they would do something like A/B testing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have you create for, let's say you have 5 ideas, and you create for each one of them TV ad or an online ad or something. And you measure the impact of each one of those 5. And then you continue with what was most powerful, and you create the story based on that. So it's more like MVP startup kind of approach. And in this way, they saw that you can maximize that investment because the story was more interesting. So instead of some executive choosing the way to go, they said, okay, we have not 1, but 5. We produce these. Let's see which is better and then continue with that. And that was really interesting, sometimes useful.
Yeah, but this is all part of what we would call in product development discovery, right? Where you go and A/B testing, user interviews. Actually, one of the very early techniques in advertising was to do user testing. Mm-hmm. You would bring people in, show them the product, see how they react to the product, then show them an ad, see how they react to the ad, and so on.
Yeah, but now with online, you can do this easily. So you can do this type of A/B testing really easily also with that.
Yeah. All right.
Going to the McKinsey ideas. Let's see what...
Yeah, let's go to that.
My first observation is that they say developer productivity, but they never define what developer is.
Well, I have one better for you. They never define what productivity means.
Yes, I looked it up. So I looked if they have one for developer, you're right. Let's look for productivity. I didn't see that. So yeah, there's no definition of what they mean.
No. This is the first thing that struck me. So again, I'm of two minds about this before we actually go in the article, because on one hand, I feel that it's very difficult to measure productivity, developer productivity, and it kind of doesn't make sense on a individual level. It makes sense on a team level at most, but it makes much more sense in terms of outcomes, as we were discussing, business outcomes. On the other hand, I think there's also a cop-out from developers trying to escape from responsibility. I mean, the whole thing, we cannot measure anything about developer productivity. I'm not sure I buy this. I think we probably can, but I'm not sure if this is the right approach.
So, as I said, I can measure productivity by asking the team. It's kind of easy. You just need to ask.
Yeah, this is on one hand. On the other hand, if I were looking at more at some kind of indicator of productivity, what I would look for is something related to the number of working features that you put in production in a unit of time, more or less. Now, the problem is with defining what a working feature is, because it can be something really big or something really small. And I think it's possible that an equalizer might be unit tests, but very small tests. That's the big thing.
You have the same definition of a unit test.
Yeah.
It's the same thing if you have the same definition of a feature, so you go to granularity.
Yeah. So
it boils down to granularity levels. So
the way I think about this is, there's one thing I tell people about user story, that, in order to understand how to split user story, the simplest user story is the one that only has one acceptance test.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it doesn't make sense to make all user stories have a single acceptance test, because sometimes there's value, but it's actually faster to do more acceptance tests for one.
Yes.
But this is a measure that you can more or less add, but it has to be a bit more standardized. I mean, it doesn't work like we'll put anything we want in acceptance tests, like the color of the button needs to be red and stuff like this.
Yeah, so
it needs to be, for a certain input we get a certain output, for another input we get another output, and so on and so forth. So it needs to be a slightly more standardized. And I think once you have that, you can probably measure the number of acceptance tests that you pass in a period of time in production.
So I think working, how we work with some of the teams, we work with PDD, specification by example, and you have business rules, and for each business rule you have examples. So typically we try to split let's say a feature, a user story, to have one business rule. And of course, depending on the business rule, it could have more or less examples, because depending what kind of complexity. So I think this is a very good rule. And the business rule is kind of simple to get, I think. That's what I see from reality of it. People understand what a business.
But that works for a certain type of product, right?
Yeah, of course. So, but this is one example where going forward with what you said. So, when it works, this is a very good way of implementing what you said.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure if this would be a perfect measure because, for example, if you're trying to do an algorithm that does something on an embedded device and the speed is very important, you cannot measure that. I mean, it's not enough to work. It also has to work really fast, and in order to work really fast, you probably need to iterate a lot more. So it starts to get murky, but
I think you also need to put the factor of novelty into the space, if you want. Because if something's really new to everybody in the organization, then of course it will be slower. So it's not directly, it's not easily measurable. It's a hint. It shows you, because if you have features, let's say a team knows most of the stuff they're doing, they've done it quite well, and then you are able to have this measurement easily. But if it's novelty, if it's a high degree of complexity compared to the rest, like you said, with a complex algorithm, then these are outliers.
Yeah. And honestly, this is a measure of output, and it says nothing about outcome. Because you could have a team that pumps out features at a very fast rate, but nothing is actually adopted by users and you get no money for it. So
yeah, so that's why I keep asking myself, what's the usefulness?
Okay.
I want to look at outcomes.
So let's start with that, because that's actually very interesting how they frame it. Compare with other critical business functions such as sales or customer operations, software development is perennially undermeasured. Kind of agree with that. Kind of. The long-held belief by many in tech is that it's not possible to do it correctly, and that in any case only trained engineers are knowledgeable enough to assess the performance of their peers. Kind of agree with it. Yet the status quo is no longer sustainable. And why? This is, I think, the key that triggered this. Now that most companies are becoming, to one degree or another, software companies, regardless of industry, leaders need to know they are deploying their most valuable talent as successfully as possible. So in my mind, this is a clash between traditional companies who are forced to become software companies. And I'm thinking about banks, insurance, but not only. Almost any company is now becoming a software company.
Yeah.
And they are used with certain kinds of metrics.
And they want to use those they know to this new ecosystem.
Exactly. And they don't fit. Nothing fits. And everybody tells them, no, we cannot measure. And of course they are... they are upset by that. Frustrated, let's say. Okay. There is no denying that measuring developer productivity is difficult. Other functions can be measured reasonably well, some even with just a single metric, whereas in software development, the link between inputs and outputs is considerably less clear. Bit of a problem, inputs and outputs. Yeah. It's useful to differentiate between outputs and outcomes.
And also inputs and outputs, because they just differentiate between inputs and outputs. But what about the quality of inputs?
Yeah.
Because, junk in, junk out.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. Software development is also highly collaborative, complex, and creative work, and requires different metrics for different levels, such as systems, teams, and individuals. What's more, even if there is genuine commitment to track productivity properly, traditional metrics can require systems and software that are set up to allow more nuanced and comprehensive measurement. For some standard metrics, entire tech stacks and development pipelines need to be reconfigured to enable tracking, and putting in place the necessary instruments and tools to yield meaningful insights can require significant long-term investment. Furthermore, the landscape of software development is changing quickly as generative AI tools such as Copilot X and ChatGPT have the potential to enable developers to complete tasks up to 2 times faster.
Okay, I understand what they say here. So you create development pipelines to enable tracking? That's weird. I never heard anyone doing that.
There is actually Google did this with Dora metrics, but their whole goal. I actually have this article open as well, but I'm not sure we'll get into it. Basically, what they were trying to do is to measure the DevOps part, more or less. So,
what was the purpose of tracking what?
How many deploys you are making in a unit of time.
Okay, but that's not why you created the pipeline, right? You created the pipeline to be able to deploy, and this
yes.
You can
so yeah, exactly. Now I am thinking, you know what? I think that the trigger came from automotive, if I'm thinking more. Because I remember seeing a video and I shared this with you. I saw a video on Twitter a few weeks ago with the CEO of Ford was talking how they had like 500 or anyway, a huge number of collaborating with a huge number of companies that were building software systems for them.
Yeah. Because each one of the sub-components had their own software system, and it was really difficult.
And because of that, they decided to move development in-house.
Which makes sense somehow.
Which somehow makes sense, because if you want electric cars with software and all that, you need to have more control on software. But I think that they are used with the kind of metrics that you get in a factory.
Of course.
And sales and marketing and all other stuff. But on production, what you get in a factory, and now suddenly you are doing software. And But yeah, I'm not sure. I would say I'm 70% sure of that. So not... Okay,
now,
to help yeah,
about this Copilot ChatGPT, I don't know what's the connection with the rest. I mean,
I think they just added it because it sounds good.
Yeah, this phrase is completely out of context.
I mean,
it's true, but it's out of context.
It could be a point that software development tends to change faster than, let's say, automotive or banking or...
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
And
also hardware industry changes a lot.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, fintech industry changes a lot. So, I don't know.
So now we happen to be at a point in time when it's even less clear what will be the next way of developing software, So maybe this is a little bit, but yeah, still, I could have done without this sentence, honestly. To help overcome these challenges and make this critical task more feasible, we developed an approach to measuring software developer productivity that is easier to deploy with surveys or existing data, such as in backlog management tools. In so doing, backlog management tools, Jesus. Should we tell them that you shouldn't manage your backlog? And just do what's most important and so on? Okay. In so doing, we built on the foundation of existing productivity metrics that industry leaders have developed over the years with an eye toward revealing opportunities for performance improvement. This new approach, they are actually saying, has been implementing at nearly 20 tech, finance, and pharmaceutical companies. So no automotive. And the initial results are promising. They include the following improvements. 20 to 30% reduction in customer-reported product defects, 20% improvement in employee experience scores, 60 percentage point improvement in customer satisfaction ratings. And now I'd like to stop a little bit here, because I find these metrics to be very unrelated with productivity.
I don't get it.
I mean, customer reporting product defects, you have less defects, you had more quality.
Anything anyway, that's what you want. So.
And maybe, so actually part of the metrics, if I remember correctly, is about deploying or more often and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why you got less product defects. It's not necessarily because you are measuring. And
or because you created a pipeline to deploy.
Maybe.
Maybe having less manual work that is error prone, you have less defects. So
yeah. Employee experience scores. This could vary. Well, I guess they are asking employees for how they feel and stuff like that, and getting a score. But is this productivity? And customer satisfaction ratings. Okay, so you got maybe more features faster, or the features that customer wanted were in production faster. More or less.
That's good.
That's good.
The connection.
But is it productivity?
It's output or outcome. Because initially they say they want to measure output, but now this is just outcome. Really.
Yeah. So, okay. And the general thing with this. This is correlation, not causation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, so they happen to implement a measurement system, and at the same time, these things happen too.
Yeah.
All right. So now it doesn't mean that because they implemented that this happened.
Yeah, there's that thing I keep saying. Is it I have my sunglasses on because it's the sun on the sky, or is it that because the sun is on the sky, I have my sunglasses on?
Exactly. All right. So now let's go the next section, leveraging productivity insights. With access to richer productivity data in insights, no idea which are those, but okay. Leaders can begin to answer pressing questions about the software engineering talent that falls so hard to attract and retain, such as the following. And this is the motivation, okay? You are asking about why. Why do you want to measure? Okay. What are the impediments to the engineers working at their best level?
That's great. Sure.
Sure. So guess what? If you ask people, and I actually did video, I don't remember which one was it, but it was a Google report. Where we discussed about usable software design and Google. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we were discussing how, they were asking engineers what is stopping them, and things actually got better because they started removing some of the impediments. Cool. Mm. How much does culture and organization affect their ability to produce their best work? Okay. How do we know if...
This question is debatable. I mean, how people answer.
Yeah.
Complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine some concrete answers, which would be... let me give you just an example. I worked with a team once. You know what I'm talking about. They were working on some features, but every time they needed to ask for special permissions from another group in order to be able to develop and deploy and stuff like that. And that other group had declared time to deliver these permissions of 1 day or 2 days, but they were actually giving those in 2 weeks or something like that. Mm-hmm. So this would be one example, right? The organization doesn't help me because it blocks me whenever I need to do something. I need to ask for permission. It takes much longer than they are saying. Okay. So there could be stuff like that. Now about culture, that's more murky. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Culture, that's complicated. I don't know what people would answer about culture. It's too abstract.
Yeah. How do we know if you are using the time on activities that truly drive value? Now, this is a good one.
This is a good one, and I see more and more companies go to OKRs, objectives and key results. And the way of doing this is that if you have, you create your OKRs on a quarterly level, monthly level, whatever. And if you work on something that is in those key results, which you think will bring value, it brings value, and so on. Yeah, you put something in production, you see that you have that key result, in fact, covered by what you put in production, so it's a confirmation that the key result was good and that you brought value by the activity that you have.
Yeah, and I know there are good implementations and pretty bad implementations of OKRs.
Yeah, it's really tough. Really. It's not an easy thing to do. It sounds easy, but...
But I would argue that other things here would be if you have good product managers that actually test things and validate things and have an intuition for the market and understand users and so on. So,
exactly.
But it's not a metric of software developers.
No, it's an ecosystem and it's a complex thing. It's very dependent on the market.
Yeah.
Because our markets, it's really tough to see if you are driving value with a short enough feedback cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Your feedback cycle are long, so you don't know exactly.
Yeah, in some markets, indeed, it's quite difficult.
Let's say gaming, when you put a game in production every year, would you think what you did 11 months ago, if it brought value? Kind of tough.
Yeah, gaming is its own thing. I played around with prototypes in gaming, and it's a completely different way. We think about it as software, but it's very different. So yeah,
that's one example. Or other software, like when you talk about trading apps.
Yeah.
Automated trading system and so on. How do you know what brought value from what you did? It's kind of difficult to know.
Yeah, you didn't go bankrupt. That's
you increased your margin share for 0.001 in the last week.
Yeah. Right, and the last one, how can we know if we have all the software engineering talent we need?
That's hard.
That's really hard. I think adjusting capacity is one of the hardest things in software development. Really. Because, so in Agile you kind of simplify it because you work with teams and you can add a new team and stuff like that. And you can move teams from one stream to another if you want to. But the challenge is still, what if you need 3 more teams, and what if they need a completely different skill set? Yeah. Because you are now doing, adding AI capabilities or stuff like that.
Or what happens if you say, let's focus on this very new shiny thing, and after putting it in production you say you don't need, it's not a good idea. What do? You go back from 3 teams to 1 team?
Yeah. I think that's the toughest part in managing software development. Well, okay, there are many others, but at least if you're working in a kind of agile environment, many of the other things that tend to be complex will be solved as part of the complex adaptive system that adjusts by itself through very small continuous adjustments that are invisible. But this thing, like actually managing capacity, it cannot do this automatically. You need managers.
I think if you look inside one team, you could this team would make sense. So if you have the software engineering talent we need, you could look like let's say you take bus factor, right? So you could have this analysis of a bus factor in a team, and then maybe focus more on T-shape.
Yeah, and let's explain.
Let's explain. Yeah.
What bus factor is. Bus factor is a metric about the resilience of a team, more or less, saying, and we don't want to have accidents in our teams, okay? It's not about that, but it's called bus factor because it's an imaginary experiment. How many people from the team, if they would be hit by a bus, would the team not function? Right, more or less. And there's actually,
if you have just one person knowing this part of the system, or just one person has the skill of this, then you're in danger of having this situation.
But where it gets really weird, because you have system effects, is you can have the reverse bus number, which is how many people from our team need to be hit by a bus. And once again, we don't want anybody to be hit by a bus. It's just imaginary. How many members of our team would need to be hit by a bus so that the team performs better? And this sounds very weird if you come from traditional management, but because software development is creative work, guess what? This can happen. Get better results with fewer people.
Sometimes it's better. Why? Because you need to correct someone else's work. So it's better just to do it yourself from the start rather than keep correcting it. It's just added work. It doesn't bring value, by the opposite.
Yeah, some people bring negative productivity, more or less.
Or too many discussions, too many controversies.
Yeah.
Too many arguments. You create these situations where instead of focusing on what you need to deliver, it's just worse. So, So that's why maybe T-shape is a good idea in this way. So if you look at the bus factor, I think this metric could make sense from this point of view if you have all the talent. So, which I see with some of the teams I work with. Well, we are working on this to have a more T-shaped approach where you have a person has more skills. They acquire more skills to be able to get the necessary or to have the necessary developments at several parts of the system depending on their skills. So, for example, you have a tester who wants to learn programming, then you have an analyst who wants to learn DevOps, and so stuff like that. This is
yeah. And one way we've been doing that is by using skill metrics, where the team from time to time. So first of all, you define what the skills are needed for the team, and then from time to time you see whether all the skills are covered by people. Ideally, each skill by 2 people at least, because you never know who's on holiday one day. Okay.
This is a conclusion. If you want to look at this last thing, team at the team level, it makes sense. If you want to look at organizational level, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, you need to start from the teams. Understanding the foundations. Okay, to use a sufficiently nuanced system of measuring developer productivity, it's essential to understand the 3 types of metrics that need to be tracked. Those are the system level, the team level, and the individual level.
Okay.
Unlike a function such as sales, where a system-level metric of dollars earned or deal closed could be used to measure the work of both teams and individuals, software development is collaborative in a distinctive way that requires different lenses. Not sure I agree with that. For instance, while deployment frequency is a perfectly good metric to assess systems or teams, it depends on all team members doing their respective tasks, and is therefore not a useful way to track individual performance. That is correct,
I agree,
but why would you want? Exactly. Another critical dimension to recognize is what the various metrics do and do not tell you. For example, measuring deployment frequency or lead time for changes can give you a clear view of certain outcomes, but not of whether an engineering organization is optimized. Let me give you some news. An engineering organization is never optimized. It keeps moving. That's, I think. Yeah.
Optimizing and what? Optimizing means that you favor some over the other, right? I don't know what optimize means.
Well, I guess in terms of outcomes, but yeah.
Yeah, but which outcomes again? Because you can optimize some sorts of outcomes with respect to the others.
Yeah, you can optimize not having bugs, and that is very easy. You just don't deliver features anymore.
Yes, so what is optimized, you know? It's really complicated. The best software is the one that you never wrote because it doesn't have any defects.
Yeah, I mean, if you have nothing, no code, it means no bugs. That's perfect.
We optimized it.
We just deleted everything, and now we have no bugs anymore. And while metrics such as story points completed or interruptions can help determine optimization, they require more investigation to identify improvements that might be beneficial, of course, because it's a complex adaptive system. So my whole frustration...
Story points completed is just a bad idea.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can look at it as a trend per team. That's
as long as the team remains the same.
Yeah.
The same people. Otherwise, it's...
And I think this is my general frustration, because it just shows me again and again that managers have no idea how to deal with complex adaptive systems, because that's fundamentally what the problem is here. So fundamentally, if you have a complex adaptive system, you have no causal relationship. This means if you see an effect, let's say you deliver more story points. Let's say this is a good metric. Okay. It's not clear whether this has come from one cause, from two causes, from 5 causes, or it has absolutely no direct cause. It's just the way things work in complex adaptive systems. You have no way of linking effect with cause. And because you don't have that, it's impossible to figure out how to optimize things in this way. This is why we are using the empirical approach, which is we see this effect and then we start asking questions. And we can do root cause analysis. Why did this happen? Well, because, I don't know, somebody deploy more feature. Why did he deploy more feature? Well, because he had more free time. Why did he have more free time? Because, and so on. And you kind of go like this and you try to replicate some of it in the future by changing slightly the system. But you never know whether it will go in the right direction or not. So the only way is to formulate experiments, run them, and see whether things go better or not. And that's...
in a fast pace, not experiments that last 2 years, but...
Yeah, things that last a sprint, 2 sprints, maybe. And you can have multiple experiments in the same time, and it doesn't matter whether you understand the results or not. Okay, that's very important, because sometimes it will just blow up, you won't understand why, you just stop, move to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. So, in building our set of metrics, we'll look to expand on the 2 sets of metrics already developed by the software industry. The first is DORA metrics, named for Google DevOps Research and Assessment Teams. So this is what DORA is, DevOps Research and Assessment. These are the closest the tech sector has to a standard, and why they are great at measuring outcomes. When a DORA metric returns a subpar outcome, it is a signal to investigate what has gone wrong, which can often involve protracted sleuthing. I had to search this because I had no idea what this means. It actually means investigating after the fact. It just requires investigation. But
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, using these words. Anyway, why do they say they are great at measuring outcomes? So why do we want to measure outcomes? And because these aren't, I don't think they are for outcomes. These are for outputs.
Let's see if I can find quickly. So this is the Dora article, but I'm not sure. I don't think you can see it. So let me read you which were the initial ones, because they slightly changed in time. But basically they used... so Google took a different approach. They did an experiment and a research and came up with metrics that influenced the system, and that actually influenced the system in 2020, because then they did some more research and the system had changed, and in 2022 they had another set of metrics.
Of course.
So it's actually a continuous research. It's not like these management models use these and they will work. It's more than that. And so through 6 years of research, the Dora team has identified 4 key metrics that indicate the performance of a software development team. So it's about software development. Once again, performance is not really defined. So, yeah. Okay. But what they are saying, deployment frequency, how often they successfully release to production, lead time for changes, the amount of time it takes a commit to get in production, change failure rate, the percentage of deployment causing a failure in production, time to restore service, how long it takes to recover from a failure in production.
Yeah, but again,
these are outputs, not outcomes. I agree.
So these aren't outcomes.
These are outputs in terms of development teams. Yeah.
Which are really useful. I'm not saying they're not.
Yeah. I think these are... I mean, they sound good, but... okay. I'm planning to have a guest that will explain a bit more of when they can fail and so on. So stay tuned. We'll have more discussions on this topic. Okay, so these are Dora. And if you see that, let's say, you get more defects in production, then you would start investigating and figure out what went wrong. And that's basically what protracted sleuthing means. It's... this is...
I'm glad it has a name.
Jargon, yeah, exactly. I keep being reminded about Weird Al Yankovic song, what's it called? Synergy.
Mission Statement is the name of the song, but it says synergy all over.
Yeah, so if you don't know... listen to that.
It's great. I think he has a new version with the newest jargon. So.
Oh, cool. So it's updated.
It's really cool.
You heard it here. Listen to Weird Al Yankovic. The second set of industry developed measurements is space metrics, satisfaction and well-being, performance, activity, communication and collaboration, and efficiency and flow, which GitHub and Microsoft Research developed to augment Dora metrics. By adopting an individual lens, particularly around developer well-being, space metrics are great at clarifying whether an engineering organization is optimized. Optimized for, we don't know. For example, an increase in interruptions that developers experience indicates a need for optimization. On top of these already powerful metrics, our approach seeks to identify what can be done to improve how products are delivered and what those improvements are worth, without the need for heavy instrumentation. Complementing Dora and space metrics with opportunity-focused metrics can create an end-to-end view of software developer productivity. And now we get to the gist of the whole thing, which is... So they mention at system level, you have 3 different lenses or focuses: outcomes focus, optimization focus, opportunities focus. And then you look at system, team, and individual level. And outcomes focus is about, are you delivering products satisfactorily? Which is this really what you want? I mean, probably what you'd want is to get money from products somehow, or to improve something for a user. But okay, system level, they say, and this kind of mix, so it's like at system level for outcomes, deployment frequency, customer satisfaction, and reliability. I guess maybe, but I have a question. What if I have a good product? I don't need to deliver any more features, so I have 0 deployment frequency, but I have very high customer satisfaction and I have improved the uptime.
I don't think the purpose of a software company is to create new features.
Yeah, it's to create impacts, like reducing the time for a user to do a task, or adding more.
If you created enough impact, you should stop or just slow down.
Yeah.
Because you're not being able to bring new value. I'm going to give you one very simple example. One of the apps for one of the banks I use for online banking, I don't think they delivered many features for the last 3, 4, 5 years. I don't think they need to much more, I have most of it what I need, so why would you measure that thing from this point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it works. So it's also a factor of where is the product in its lifetime, right? Because you have a lifetime of products. First you have early adopters, and then you have a lot more people joining, but then it kind of starts to go down, and at some point it dies and you remove it, replace it with something new. Or
it depends also on the type of the market and how much you have, how many new ideas or new trends you have in the market, so that you constantly need to deliver stuff. But in some other areas, you just don't need to deliver new stuff. Look at Excel or Word or word processing.
Yeah.
Most of it is there. You just need to work. What new features can you bring to a word processing document?
And then let's look at the next one. So outcomes at team level, lead time for changes, change failure rate, time to restore service. Okay, these are kind of okay. Code review velocity. Really?
Yeah, that one is weird.
What if we are doing mob programming? Or that's not allowed?
No, it's slow. It's too slow.
Well, I would say it's the fastest code review because we don't do any code review. So.
No. It's code review of 7 hours.
You just push to production and it works. So.
Yeah, but all the team was there. You consider everything as being the code review, all the process.
Okay, then there are a lot of these, so let's go through a few more. Individual level developer satisfaction and retention. Okay, I'm not sure how this relates to outcome, but optimization focus. Are you delivering products in an optimized way? System level, code review timing. Once again with the code reviews. What is with code reviews that these people are obsessed with them? Velocity flow through the system. Now this makes sense. Team level. Now be prepared. Story points completed.
This one is so easy to game.
Yeah.
So easy to game.
Yeah. You You just write stories that have one acceptance test.
You just start
Or you just
more story points, more and more story points.
Yeah, you just estimate. Instead of 2, you put a 5.
More and more. And then there you go. More stories completed. We doubled the amount of story points. We're a team that is 2 times better than we were.
And then you handoffs. Now it would be interesting to measure handoffs, but I'm not sure you can. Because sometimes...
You can by interviews.
Yeah, more or less. You can if you're doing an honest value stream map.
Yeah.
But yeah. Individual level interruptions. I wonder if they are taking into account interruptions by meetings set by managers.
And are the daily meetings interruptions?
Yeah, that's another question. Maybe you should just do them on, don't do daily anymore. It's an interruption.
Is a strategy meeting interruption?
Well, they actually
interruption.
They actually mentioned something which is really weird, a bit lower. But let's first go through this, and then I'll tell you. It's quite
okay.
Opportunities focus. Are there specific opportunities to improve how you deliver products and what are they worth? At system level, satisfaction with the engineering system, inner outer loop time spent.
I don't know what that means. Satisfaction.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
abstract.
I would say that this is where usable software design would make a point. And you can actually measure.
That,
yeah. But yeah, team level, quality of documentation. Now, who says what's the quality of documentation? Developer velocity index benchmark.
Oh boy.
Contribution analysis.
I don't know.
And at individual level, contribution analysis and talent capability score. So these...
What is talent capability score?
Okay, so inner outer loop time spent. They have a diagram here regarding inner outer loop. Inner loop, build, code, test. So this is what developers say they like to do. Outer loop, meetings, integrate, security and compliance, deploy at scale. This is what they don't like to do, basically. And so top tech companies aim for developers to spend up to 70% of their time doing inner loop activities, build, code, test. But now, it's very interesting. For example, one company that had previously completed a successful agile transformation learned that its developers, instead of coding, were spending too much time on low value added tasks, such as provisioning infrastructure. Okay, this can be automated, probably should automate it. Running manual unit tests, can automate. Managing test data, okay. Armed with that insight, he launched a series of new tools and automation products to help with those tasks across the software development lifecycle.
That's a very good analysis of improving.
However, what I don't like is that you have meetings here, which meetings is a whole bucket, right?
Yeah. Any meeting.
What if you do pair programming? Is this part of code? Is that a meeting?
Yeah, we don't know. But is refinement here? Or is it part of build? Or is it part of test?
It's part of meetings, I assume.
So you shouldn't understand what you need to do anymore.
Of course.
Now, I agree that you don't need to have refinement of 10 hours, but you do need to do some refinement.
You need to understand what you're doing. And I think that's another thing that's frustrating to me, because I believe this whole thing not only misses complex adaptive system, but it misses the knowledge model of software engineering, which is you start from knowledge that is unrefined, you end up with very refined knowledge.
Yeah.
Which can be executed by a computer because it's part of a program.
And one more thing about this security and compliance.
These are outer loop things that.
Anymore. What do you mean?
Things that you need to do, but you don't like to do as a developer, you know?
I don't know. I know developers who like to create their code secure and compliant. And they don't need to spend much time about this because they know how to do it.
Yeah, to be honest, what they say is they mention that you want to have the inner loop about 70% of the time. So it doesn't mean that you never do anything of it from here. Mm-hmm. It just means that you spend most of the time on coding, as they said.
But this is what security in most organizations is part of code. Because you need to write code in a certain way which is secured. Otherwise, your whole system might go down and you can go bankrupt because someone created a loophole in the system and hackers went in and got all your data. So I don't get this, why this is here. Security and compliance.
Yeah.
It's part of coding.
Now in contribution analysis is another thing that's a bit weird. Assessing contribution by individuals to team backlog, starting with data from backlog management tools such as Jira, and normalizing data using a proprietary algorithm to account for nuances, so we have no idea what they are doing, can help surface trends that inhibit the optimization of the team's capacity. This kind of insight can enable team leaders to manage clear expectations from output and improve performance as a result. Additionally, can help identify opportunities for individual upskilling or training and rethinking role redistribution within a team. For example, one company, this is one that I found really missing the point. I think that's the one. Let's see. One company found that its most talented developers are spending excessive time on non-coding activities, such as design sessions, or managing interdependencies across teams. In response, the company changed its operating model and clarified roles and responsibilities to enable those highest value developers to do what they do best, code.
So they code, but they don't design anymore.
Yeah. I mean, not as part of a design session. You probably... So...
mind-blowing.
So these are things that are missing the mark completely, because if you are thinking in terms of knowledge, right, what you have is you get some knowledge, which is the requirements, wants and needs and stuff. Even if it's a specification, it's still not enough to implement it completely. And then you need to go
like that anyway. You wouldn't want a developer just to look at specification and implementing those like
Ideally, they will need to understand why was the problem.
Come up with better ideas,
exactly.
Feedback, so.
And then work with other developers to kind of figure out, how about we try that? How about we try that? How about we? And at the end, you have a solution, which, by the way, can cover only 80%, might cover only 80% of the problem.
Yeah.
And that's good enough, most of the cases. But if you think in these terms, it makes no sense to say, why are you spending time in a design session? Why are you spending time discussing with other people about what you're trying to do? You want more brains to work on the knowledge refinement process, because it does require brain capacity. It's not about writing lines of code, it's about solving problems. So this is where it completely misses the mark in my estimation. Now you might look at some contributions and say, okay, so that I would like that person who is a very experienced developer to spend less time trying to figure out how teams should coordinate.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because coordination is a very when you need to coordinate, that's an idea that the system is bad. So you need to change the system in such a way that you need to coordinate less. Maybe focus on value streams as a hint is sometimes a good idea. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah. And so there's the, what's the name of the model with complex adaptive system, the Kinevin model, right?
Yeah.
And if you're working in the complex domain, one way of dealing with that is what Dave Snowden calls probes.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't actually have to do this contribution analysis, but what you need to have is, for example, I just learned this today. The CEO from NVIDIA seems to understand really well complex adaptive systems and how to manage things. One thing he's doing is he has implemented a system. He has an email address where anyone from the company can write to him the 5 most important problems that they see. Top 5 problems. And the first thing that he does is he reads 100 of these emails, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then compiles them and figures out, this is an example of probes, because then you find out which are the tendencies in your system. But in that case, you understand that your system is kind of moving all the time, and you need to understand its tendency and then figure out what constraints to put so that you stop certain tendencies and accelerate others. But it's much more difficult than, asking people, so what did you do and why why did you do that? All right. Now, honestly, one of the good things about this article is this part, avoiding metrics missteps. As valuable as it can be, developer productivity data can be damaging to organizations if used incorrectly, so it's important to avoid certain pitfalls. Oh, yeah. In our work, we see 2 main types of missteps occur: misuse of metrics and failing to move past all mindsets. Misuse is most common when companies try to employ over simple measurements, such as lines of code produced or number of code commits, and so on. I don't think we need to say why these are bad. To truly benefit from measuring productivity, leaders and developers alike need to move past the outdated notion that leaders cannot understand the intricacies of software engineering or that engineering is too complex to measure. Okay, this one, I still am not sure that you are measuring the right things. That would be kind of my conclusion. And at the end, they are actually giving you, we have basically the last section is, we McKinsey, we have a way of deploying that and come to us too. We can help you, right? So yeah, that's the least interesting part. But so this is the article. Now my plan is to do another session where we discuss reactions to this article from people like Kent Beck, Dan North, and we'll see whoever else I can find. But we've already, as you can see, it's a very complex problem. And my general stance is I think you can measure some things, but I think we still haven't got to the point where we understand what to measure.
I think you can measure many things. As the saying is, what gets measured gets managed. And that's why it's really dangerous to manage things that aren't useful. I don't think we have a full idea. So that's why I'm saying And most of the things that are useful, I'm saying, let's get back to the team and ask them. Ask them what they believe. And in my view, this is what brings most benefit, because I'm not really interested in metrics and in development metrics, really. I'm interested in having more value, business value developed. And so outcomes, not outputs. If I see that I can improve these outcomes, I can deliver more business value, and I'm happy with that. I don't know why you'd need more small-brained metrics, like personal metrics, and even team metrics.
I mean, there is a need for hiring and knowing when to hire and knowing where to deploy teams. And I kind of understand that. And it's not like you can, let's say if you have 10 teams and you are working in this powerful way in Agile in which you can basically deploy a team to another value stream. And but the reality is that this is not an inexpensive
it's really expensive.
thing.
But what's the connection with the development productivity? I don't get it.
Yeah, I think one of my main criticism is there's no definition of productivity. What are we looking for? And
Want more
not
code being written? Is that the thing? I don't think so. We want less code because more code is more costly to maintain. So I don't know. More features being developed, fine, but you cannot say that just the developer is producing that. Or what means a developer? Is an analyst a developer? Is a programmer who's doing also analysis a developer? Is a tester who's doing DevOps also a developer? I don't know. I don't understand what they mean.
Yeah, I'm thinking about myself. I've been doing working on some internal products, and I've been doing the analysis, the UX, the UI design, the implementation, testing, deployment, making decisions on what infrastructures to use and so on. And in my mind, many of these are very related. It's not like I can separate a lot of them. I understand why you need to separate in a larger product, but really it's not necessarily the best idea. And I know it might sound controversial, but look, if you are involved in UX design as a programmer, not the whole thing. I mean, okay, there are a bunch of things, but at least talking to users, understanding their problems, seeing how they react to the most refined test. That will give you much more insight into what to implement, what they are expecting, how fast things should be moving, what is the probability for change of that feature, and so on, which influences a lot of things in design. Right, so that's about it. I think we already discussed quite a lot. It's quite a long video. Anyway, any conclusions before we end? Or
yeah, my conclusion is that we do need to measure some things. Every company is different and they need to focus on what they need to measure. What gets measured gets managed. Be very wary of measuring the wrong things, because that's what you'll manage and it might bring you to the wrong efforts and the wrong conclusions. So that's why developer productivity, in my view, is not something really useful in most of the cases. So I wouldn't measure it.
all right, and I agree with the sole observation that it might be interesting to have more experiments in measuring things.
Yeah.
But while taking into account the the aspects of complex adaptive systems and knowledge work. These are the things that I think are fundamentally missing from all this. All right, thank you, Adi.
Thank you as well.
I think this was very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for watching. What do you think? Are you part of an organization that tries to measure things? And what do they try to measure? What are the impacts? Let us know in the comments. Thank you kindly for the view. There are more videos coming on this topic. And depending on your comments, we might come with even more ideas. So thank you kindly for the view. And until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.